not going to kill y'all if I don't got to. I got a bayou over here. Take it. Stay to the west side. We want to find a road about a mile up there.
Do you mind telling us what's going on?
It's real simple. We live back in here. This is our home, and nobody don't fault with us.
What about him?
What about him?
Did he do it to himself, or did your friends help him out?
If I was you all, I'd quit asking questions and haul ass. But my buddies, they're not nice like me.
Are we supposed to say thanks?
You're not supposed to say nothing, soldier.
Come on, Hart.
You are listening to TMBDOS. They must be destroyed on sight. The following podcast may contain adult language and discussions of an adult nature. Spoilers for the films discussed occur often. You have been warned. Now, take it away, Dr. Rausch.
They must be destroyed on sight.
It is They Must Be Destroyed on Sight, episode 201. And I'm your host, Lee. Small unit military penetration, Russell. And I'm joined by my co-host, Daniel, like steel pussies, Harper. How you doing, sir?
I am not wading through a swamp in which a bunch of Cajuns or Viet Cong are trying to kill me.
Yeah. If that doesn't tip you off, and if you haven't read the title of the episode, we are going to be covering Walter Hill's Southern Comfort from 1981. But before we get into that, we do have a YouTube comment, and a rather long one, too. And it's a nice one as well. So
good. I'm glad that you tell me that in advance so I don't have to steel myself for the relentless logic and completely like the well-written prose that our YouTube commenters usually come up with when they trash our podcast.
This is actually a episode that has gotten some good posts on it lately, as opposed to a lot of our episodes which Is
it Bad Day at Black Rock?
No.
Okay.
Because you usually get shitty comments on that one, right?
Right.
This is one that's been sort of garnering good comments, and it's probably our most controversial episode on YouTube because people are just looking for spank material, and they don't get it. So on our episode on the cheerleaders, someone called Rich V says, I have never seen a movie anything like The Cheerleaders. Any sex comedy after was a poor imitation. Believe it or not, I saw The Cheerleaders in the Newark College of Engineering Theater in 1973. It's now the New Jersey, or NJIT, whatever that stands for. I don't know.
New Jersey Institute for Technology?
Probably.
Yeah.
Could have been shown at
Which
other...
is the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, but like 2 states down. That's essentially what the,
Could it have been shown at any other colleges or universities, or even West Point? Nah, I doubt at any co-ed ones either. Yeah, probably not. Probably especially not at co-ed colleges. You probably weren't going to see this screened anywhere.
Did he say it was in the 70s that he saw it, or was it later on?
Yeah, I think he's saying he saw it in the 70s.
I can sort of see, like, the 70s were a weird time, and I could sort of see, like, a college, kind of throwing this up for students. And like, oh, yeah, this is a thing. We're gonna watch the cheerleaders.
Yeah.
This is a pre-modern era. This was when dinosaurs roamed the earth or whatever,
I mean, maybe someone were kind of like catching on to our sort of like little half theories that maybe there's a secret art film here in the cheerleaders somewhere underneath all those titties.
Or maybe it was just a thing that they did for the students too. One or the other. Clearly, it was one or the other. We'll never know.
Yeah, he says he never saw so many goons in one theater. I think I saw 5 girls total at the college in 4 years, and none were attractive. LOL. Okay. But he says one of the actors, Vinny, the character of Vinny, and that was one of the, and I don't even know if you would remember this, Daniel. He's one of the, like, bikers that they try to fuck. And there's, like, these two bikers, and they're still trying to get, like, the main character laid so she can become one of the cheerleading squad.
Right.
Yeah, and so she's like, well, what about those two guys over there? And the lead cheerleader's like, oh, they're kind of greasy and dirty, but she's like, we should just do it. We should just go fuck them. And they try to fuck them, and it doesn't work out very well. So anyway, the one that's called Vinny was also an American Graffiti, apparently. Can you believe it? And then he linked to his Facebook page, John Brassisi, I believe is his name. He doesn't have a large IMDb, but he was also in Goodfellas, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that.
Oh.
Just one of those,
like, vaguely Italian-looking guy who showed up in, like, some movies.
Yeah. But so he linked that. And apparently the guy was also in American Graffiti. He goes on saying, "Was this movie ever shown on cable TV or Netflix, cut or uncut?"
None of the stuff ever. I mean, maybe back in, like, kind of that, like, 2011 era, like, this was on Netflix during the sort of when Netflix just owned the streaming rights for everything because nobody else, like, kind of had any kind of infrastructure to do anything with it. Like, you can maybe imagine this was, like, on the, like, I remember the era, and, like, even you and I have talked about this on the podcast back when we first started. I remember the era of, like, literally everything was on Netflix, you know?
Yeah.
Wasn't that a beautiful time in which you could just, like, search for a movie and watch it because, like, you paid your, like, $10 a month or whatever for a Netflix subscription. And now that is not the case. Although we will see what happens post-coronavirus when all these companies get crushed too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we'll see. Yeah.
He says that at the very least it wasn't on Skinamax. I think the problem why is the mentioning in the advertising for this that Jeannie is 16 in the movie. She's supposed to be 16 years old.
Right.
Yeah. But he says two great movies in 73, this and American Graffiti. And the theaters were so big, each with one just big, huge screen. Yeah, I can still remember when movie theaters just had one big, huge screen and weren't, like the doubled up or whatever split and everything. But
yeah, it's funny, like, I don't know if this is just a difference between you and me and kind of where we grew up or whatever, but, like, I never got that experience. I've been to the Music Box Theater in Chicago, which is kind of, it's not a multiplex. It has a couple, but it is one of those kind of old theaters where it's got these kind of, like, giant screens. I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark there one day, fairly randomly. It was a beautiful date night, which happened completely randomly, which is one of the, like, most beautiful cinema experiences of my life. Were I to live in Chicago, I would visit the Music Box very often. Although, again, not during the coronavirus. But like, all my theaters, like, there were, like, kind of the dollar theaters and sort of, like, the 2-screen theaters, like, kind of in my hometown. This was slightly pre-multiplex, but I don't actually have personal experience with sort of the era of, like, there's one screen in a movie theater sort of thing,
Yeah, we had a local theater. It's now been since converted into, like, a 2-floor, like, bar and restaurant kind of deal, but a couple towns down, and it was a big screen theater, just nice big screen. They eventually started running into money issues, and so they cut it into 2 screens and tried to, hey, we've got a couple movies showing instead of just one tonight. You can take your pick, and unfortunately, it's still ran dry. We still do have some theaters around here, but that was just sort of a victim of, the emerging DVD market and all that stuff. It was just like, why go to the theater when you can just go to ABC Video and rent a DVD for the night or whatever, right? So, yeah.
I still remember when multiplex was sort of like a mark of derision, like, oh, you're going to go to the multiplex. 8 screens there. Don't you know that that's, like, losing artistic integrity? And the reality is, like, if you kind of think about it, the reality is that, like, in a sort of modern film market, the idea that there are, like, 1 or 2 screens means that, like, the only thing that plays are, like, the biggest movies of the week, And so, like, I remember I got to see Y Tu Mama Tambien on a big screen.
Oh, yeah.
At a multiplex outside the mall, like, because that theater had 10 screens. And so they would just take the kind of oddball stuff.
Yeah.
And so you don't like it. It's kind of a weird, it's kind of a mixed bag sometimes, because sometimes you could get like, there was somebody there that either cared enough to like kind of program the oddball stuff, or there was somebody there who just kind of took whatever somebody offered. So it's hard to know, like, ultimately. But yeah, I saw Ichimama Tambien, at like a midnight showing in a tiny little movie theater in Huntsville, Alabama.
That's awesome.
Outside next to the Sears, because it was
Sears. What? All these kids listening to this, like, what are they talking about? These old men.
Yeah, we're old people.
Like, do you want to know what the last movie I saw in that theater was before it closed down? This is how old it is.
Sure.
Beavis and Butthead Do America.
Wow, that's what, 96?
Mm.
Something like that. 96, 97?
97.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, went on a date. It was a good date.
Oh.
Don't
Is
remember
that the last date you've been on? I would believe it. Yeah.
No, not the last, but it's not like I had a shit ton since, but
Fair enough.
I mean, I can't go to. There's no theaters to go to anymore for Oscars.
No. Our podcast makes more money than the entire movie industry does right now.
Yeah,
and our podcast doesn't make any money. So. I love seeing those graphs. It's like the entire film industry in the United States made like $1,400. Jesus fucking Christ! The whole industry is being fucked. We'll see. It's coronavirus. That's where
man.
Life is going to change. Yeah, we should move on.
Yeah, but yeah, we'll move on now to what we've watched in the last little while, and I'll let you go first there, Daniel.
Sure. I watched. I've been kind of watching a little bit of stuff. I think Lee and I are both essential workers, so unfortunately we're both. Well, it's kind of a mixed bag, right? Because we're both working, which is nice. In the sense that money still comes in, but also like if we weren't, we could just sit and watch movies and do like 5 episodes a week. But I haven't been watching that much stuff because I've been, kind of like dealing with like both the pressures of the pandemic and work schedule, which if anything has become more stressful. But I did watch I think it's a 4-part miniseries on Netflix, and it's called How to Fix a Drug Scandal. I've been watching quite a few documentaries lately because I find them kind of strangely soothing. Like they kind of feed my brain, but don't require me to kind of get kind of emotionally invested in people in the same way. And this is a series that's kind of about, there were these 2 incidents in Pennsylvania a few years ago, like 10 years ago, in which it turned out that there were 2 drug testing labs, like people like kind of testing for a drug product. You get a baggie of something that looks like heroin. You test it to see what it is, if it's heroin. And you put things out as positive or negative, right?
Right.
And you get there were these 2 labs, and there was this kind of simultaneous scandal where 2 individual people were faking results in 2 very different ways. And it's kind of a fascinating watch. I, without revealing too much about myself, I am a chemist in my day. I don't do, I don't work in a drug testing lab, but, I have some experience with some of the general kind of thing. It's kind of a fascinating story in the sense that it does kind of tell the stories of these 2 women and sort of like why they did the things that they did. And it is 2 very different stories. The first one is, basically she's pumping out data, she's pumping out product, and there's always kind of a backlog, and you just kind of sit there, you're in this rickety lab, you get no support, there's no kind of money that goes in except like, and they just want results, and so you just kind of like pump it out, and then it's like, I need some energy, I need something to kind of get me through the day, and I've got this like this giant bottle of like methamphetamine just kind of sitting over there. And so she was literally doing like a drop of methamphetamine a day just to kind of get her through for years. Like she would do this like, once a day, 2 times a day, 3 times a day, just to sort of like move through her day until she became like addicted to meth. And then she kind of went like deeper down the rabbit hole as like, her bosses started to kind of like look at like, oh, there's this bottle, we did inventory, and then kind of all this kind of complicated stuff. And then the other one was someone who was basically pushing through like 4 times as much product as anybody else in the lab, and nobody knew how she was doing it, and the way that she was doing it was faking her results. Because ultimately what the DAs want and what law enforcement wants is a positive result so they can
want convictions. Yeah.
I did find the thing, it's fascinating all the way through, and it does kind of tell these kind of human stories, and it does kind of get into that. What I find frustrating is that it sort of blames these 2 women for this, as opposed to sort of the system that sort of like needed those results.
Right.
It really doesn't kind of push on that in the way that I think it should, because ultimately kind of like it's very easy to kind of blame, oh yeah, this person got into drug addiction. It's like, no, she was working like 12-hour days, like doing like this incredibly repetitive, boring work, and needed something to kind of get through her day. And then the other one was literally just like making up results and feeding it to people because like that's what the system wants ultimately. And it is definitely a worthwhile watch, but it does have some issues, and I would recommend it. So sorry, I kind of went off a little bit on that, but
that's cool. Yeah, that sounds good. I have 3 things I'll mention. First 2 are they actually directly connect to what we're doing tonight in a certain way, in that they're both hicksploitation films. And I'd say Southern Comfort kind of fits into that hicksploitation.
Certainly in the last like 20 minutes.
Yeah, and it's also much more heavily deliverance and like survival genre or whatever. But these 2, do you know who Jesse Vint is?
I know who Jesse Ventura is.
Not the same. You would probably know him if you saw his face, because he's a pretty well-known character actor. But I watched 2 films starring Jesse Vint. First one is Macon County Line from 1974. This is one about Jesse Vint, and Jesse Vint and his brother, real life brother, play brothers in this, and they've got like a week left of carefree, just hell raising in the deep South before they get sent off in the military to basically, waive off some criminal charges that they had pending against them, which is a thing you could do. I don't know if that's still a thing that the U.S. Army does, but
I get the feeling there's quite a bit of that kind of going on even today. Yeah.
They basically become victims of circumstance, because they do raise a little hell. Like they're not going on a killing spree or nothing, but they do raise hell. They're out for a party. They're out to fuck some women and stuff. They just get caught up in these really bad circumstances because they just happen to be traveling around the same time that these pair of killers are traveling around the town. And these killers happen to kill the wife of the local sheriff. There's a home invasion and they kill her. And of course they rape her because it's the 1970s and that's what happens in these films.
Yep.
And of course the sheriff goes bonkers and goes nuts on a vendetta to get these 2 guys, because he suspects, hey, it's these 2 guys that I saw earlier. It's not these killers that are unknown to me. It's these 2 fuckers, because, they're not from the South, or at least not from this part of the South. So, they're invaders, and it's that whole kind of idea. It's really tragic. It's surprisingly great. Like it's way. It was just sort of like put in the sort of like drive-ins and stuff like that as an exploitation film. Way better than anything that would have been playing next to it in like a drive-in theater. It just like some cheapy exploitation double bill or whatever.
I like to imagine like driving up to a drive-in in the 70s and being like, oh, I'm looking for boobies and guns and some blood. And then finding like a real movie and being like, I feel cheated.
Well, I mean, this movie has that stuff, but it's just so well acted and so tragic and just well realized. It's on my best of the year list right now.
Well,
it's very good.
Maybe we should do it then.
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah, we could time travel back to the 70s, maybe, or if we get to the 70s this year, whatever happens first.
Whatever happens, maybe we'll do it in 3 years. Who knows?
Yeah. But continuing on, so that was from 74. Jesse Vint went on to be the co-writer on this next one, Black Oak Conspiracy. from 1977, which is kind of a ripoff of Walking Tall because it's about small town corruption and the towny boy who made good outside of town and comes back and finds he has to clean up his town. Same kind of idea a little bit. But yeah, Jesse Vint plays like a sort of journeyman stuntman who comes back to take care of his mother in town and finds that his mother's being swindled by like land developers and stuff like that. And like there's this whole conspiracy in Black Oak going on. And he unravels it. It's also really good. Some surprising.
Well, let's do a two-parter. Let's do that before we go back to Silence. Like that, these both sound really good. Let's just do that.
All right, cool. Well, let's do it. Again, another one I think I'm putting on my best of the year list. Like it's fucking great. Like both of these are just like they really punched above their weight. I wasn't expecting.
And we have already seen like a ton of great. It turns out that when you go back to the 1920s and you go like, oh yeah, let's watch the movies that have maintained a reputation for 100 years. You find a lot of really fucking good movies.
Yeah, it's funny how that works, right?
Yeah. So that's high praise. I think, yeah, we should do that before we jump back to the 20s.
All right,
we should just do those two movies. Yeah.
And the last one, by the way, I'll mention those two movies if anyone listening is interested in checking them out before we get to them. They're both on the Shout Factory TV for free, so you can just pick them right up. And the other one I watched, and this is also on Shout Factory TV, you can see a theme here. I was watching a lot of Shout Factory TV as this whole coronavirus thing sort of came down. But The Human Factor from 1975, and this is starring George Kennedy. And this is kind of a Death Wish ripoff in a way, but it's also kind of a combination of an espionage film at the same time, because George Kennedy plays this computer programmer who works for NATO, and he's stationed in Italy, and they're running war games against the communists, right? And so his family gets murdered just out of the blue. He comes home to find his family.
As you do, your family gets murdered, yeah.
And he, George Kennedy, big barrel-chested, common-looking guy. You didn't expect him to be an action hero or anything like that, but he just descends into this intense rage and decides, I'm going to find the killers and find out why they killed my family and shit. And it's really well done too. Like the last third of that film, he just goes on this fucking rampage and starts killing people. And like, at first you're like, I can't buy him as an action hero until he starts doing it. And you're like, oh my God, George Kennedy. I mean, what can't you do?
Yeah, no, that also sounds great.
It's kind of neat too. Like it's a little teeny bit sci-fi because I think at that time the computers could not quite do what he's doing with them to like track the killers, but still.
Yeah, no, like I am kind of like interested in watching that as well. I think doing, I don't know. Now I'm like, yeah, let's just program this for next week. Let's just do it. Yeah, probably. I'm probably not gonna have time to watch all that, but yeah, we can go from there.
Yeah, but definitely stuff to get to. But yeah, that's what I watched of note anyway. There's some other stuff, but I mean those are the main things that stuck out to me. Yeah, so we're gonna take a break. Oh, excuse me. So yeah, we're gonna take a break. I'm gonna not burp this time. And we're going to play a little bit.
Rude. Very rude.
I mean, after 200 episodes, what the fuck do people expect?
Yeah, nobody cares anymore. We're past 200 episodes. We have officially hit our peak. It's all downhill from here. Yeah,
but, for those people who are on the downward swing with us, we appreciate it. And we're going to play some music and some podcast promos. And we're going to come back and talk about Southern Comfort.
You ungodly warlock.
New movie reviews all the time. See if these films age just like a fine wine.
Oh no, we'll jack it up again.
TV, games, and more within.
Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb are all the rage, but we'll lock those critics up in one cage.
The Jacked Up Review Show, every Wednesday evening on Spotify, Podbean, Anchor, and other available podcast apps.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. And while Witch didn't make it to the top of the world, he did make the Gangs of Hollywood podcast. So join the gang and enjoy a movie review podcast about movie gangs, gangsters, mobsters, and the mayhem they cause. You can find GOH Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at GOH Pod at www.gohpod.com, as well as your favorite podcast listening app. And remember, say hello to your little friend for me. You ungodly warlock.
All right, Southern Comfort from 1981.
It will show you as much about survival as deliverance, as much about human courage as Midnight Express, as much about armed conflict as Apocalypse Now. The bayous of Louisiana, the home of a little understood group of Americans. They're a peaceful people as long as they're left alone.
Everybody out of the truck!
The National Guard on weekend maneuvers. In 48 hours, they'll be home with their families. There's only one problem.
We live back in here. This is our home.
They've crossed a boundary into a territory where they don't belong.
We ran into some people that are real weird, and I think maybe they're trying to kill us.
They've violated laws they never knew existed.
Somebody figure out where the hell we're going and do it quick. Gotta go east to go north. Tell that damn thing.
And the farther they go, the closer they get to nowhere.
I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna fight my way out of here.
Southern Comfort. It's the land of hospitality, unless you don't belong there.
Directed by Walter Hill, who you may know from Hard Times, and we covered one of his films, The Driver,
Yep.
The Warriors, 48 Hours, Red Heat, among a shit ton of other stuff. Co-wrote the story for Aliens, I believe, at the very least. And so he's got
Alien, the first one.
Are you sure it was Alien?
I was looking at his Wikipedia page today. I thought it was the first one.
I think it was Aliens, because then after that he got like co-writing credits for like every subsequent Alien sequel or whatever. But so I thought Alien was. I thought it. Oh no, you're probably right. Yeah, I think he was on Alien too. Yeah, probably. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, I just fucked up your entire thing. Yeah, I get it. Alien, from his Wikipedia page. The script came to him, which he optioned and rewrote with his partner. Not credited for the writing work. Said not to direct the film, which came to it. So he did. Walter Hill's somebody who did like he's one of those like Hollywood guys, right?
Mhm.
So he kind of had his fingers on a whole bunch of stuff, and you kind of look back and go like, yeah, he did. He got paid to do like an uncredited like rewrite of Alien, and how much of that original, how much of his stuff ended up in the final film, like who knows, right?
Yeah.
But,
So this is starring Keith Carradine of the Carradine acting family as Spencer. You might know Keith Carradine from Nashville. He played in The Long Riders with, I think, all of his brothers at that point, a Western. And he was even in Wild Bill from, the 90s, I believe that was, right? Yeah. Powers Booth is Hardin. And if you don't know him...
who both is unreasonably young, if you kind of only know him as I mostly do from his later career, and still looks like very middle-aged.
He looks 50. He looks like he's hitting 50.
He looks both 50 and 20 to me. It's kind of an amazing.
He's like one of those. He's like one of those like college football players you saw in the 70s, where they're clearly like 23, but their hairline is like 55. Like that's.
I mean, he's built like a brick shit house, right? Yeah. Like he's definitely built, but he's also. He doesn't seem young. He seems like he's got some miles on him, but we're so used to his like kind of later appearance in things like Sin City and Deadwood, et cetera, that like it's kind of hard to kind of look back at him. So like it's kind of a weird experience, but he's great at it. No complaints about the performance.
Also notable Red Dawn. And Frailty is one I would also credit as the cop, as the who's going at
Frailty. Jeez.
Yeah, he was like the FBI agent or whatever.
That's another film that I saw at that like weird movie theater. Played for 2 weeks in this fucking mall parking lot movie theater.
Such a great film.
I did see that in the big screen. Oh, man, we might have to just kind of use this excuse to just kind of plug in some favorites for before we go back to silence.
I'm not going to complain about that. The great Fred Ward as Reese. You might know him from Tremors.
Yep, Tremors also should be on our list to do.
Remo Williams, The Adventure Begins. If you haven't seen that, that's actually pretty fun. And also the HBO TV movie Cast a Deadly Spell, which was sort of a hey, we're winking at you. We know H.P. Lovecraft, and we can drop some names and stuff. It's basically a horror detective movie from HBO. Yeah,
interesting. Yeah,
yeah. The sequel actually had Dennis Hopper playing the role, which wasn't as good. Fred Ward just is a better noir detective than Dennis Hopper. But there you go.
We're just going to leave that here for now. We'll put a pin in that and come back to it in 200 episodes.
Yeah. Franklin Seals as Sims, T.K. Carter as Cribbs, Lewis Smith as Stucky, and I know Lewis Smith as the Heavenly Kid. Have you ever seen the Heavenly Kid from the 80s? He's
the ghost?
Yes, he's the greaser who comes back. He comes
back as a ghost.
But
that's all I remember. There were probably some tits in that movie. Maybe, I don't know. I saw a bunch as a kid.
I think there might have been tits in that, but at the very least, he gets basically his mission is, hey, if you want to earn your wings, you got to have this. Yeah, you got to get this class dork to get laid. Basically, it's basically it. So, and he gets laid. Les Lannon as Casper, Peter Coyote as Poole, Alan Altree as Bowden, and Brian James as Trapper. Brian James, if you don't know who the fuck this guy is, I mean, I don't know if you've watched movies. Blade Runner, Enemy Mine, Cherry 2000, Tango and Cash. He's played like the heavy in almost every great movie from like the 80s and right into the 90s before he died, basically.
He gets frozen to death in The Fifth Element. So,
yeah. Yeah,
it's funny. Like I saw his face, and I'm like, "Where do I know that face from?"
Mm-hmm.
And literally, my brain, like, I picked him out from Blade Runner first, but the thing that I really know him for is The Fifth Element, and so.
Man, he died way too young too. Like he died right at
from a heart attack or something. Yeah.
Right in the end of the 90s. But he's great. But we have a synopsis here from someone called Keith Lowe. And he says a squad of National Guards on an isolated weekend exercise in the Louisiana swamp must fight for their lives when they anger local Cajuns by stealing their canoes. Without live ammunition and a strange country, their experience begins to mirror the Vietnam experience. Well, God, give it away already. Jesus Christ.
I love reading the Wikipedia page for this film where Walter Hill, like in like several places on the Wikipedia page, is saying like, people are going to say this film is about Vietnam. This is not about Vietnam. This is definitely not about Vietnam. And you watch the film and it's like, this film is totally about Vietnam. There's no
I can understand it. Like, I don't know if he's trolling or if I can understand.
I feel like we'll get into this, I think, but I feel like the thing is like, I don't want this to seem like a kind of political anti-Vietnam movie. Like, this is released in 1981, which is only a few years out. I mean, the last troops were pulled out in 1975.
Yeah.
So this is a very kind of recent thing, and saying like, look, what I want people to come away with this from is like kind of look at the characters and kind of look at the situation and kind of look, and I'm not trying to make it kind of like overtly political movie that's like going to be kind of viewed through this lens of this is about Vietnam. But at the same time, it's very clearly about
Vietnam. Yeah,
right.
It's like
and I feel like we could do two different reviews, like one where we view it through the lens of like, if we view this as a Vietnam metaphor, and one that's like kind of like separated from that, and I feel like the some of what makes the film work is in that kind of that liminal space, that kind of region between like, is this kind of about the Vietnam War? Is this kind of about kind of a political commentary? Or is this something that's more elemental or more kind of like looking at kind of bigger picture, kind of philosophical, metaphysical ideas? And it's a complicated. I don't know. I'll be interested to see where this conversation goes ultimately.
All right. So, what do you think of this movie, Daniel?
Well, I kind of want to reference the bullshit,
We might as well just let people know we're starting this over.
So we've already recorded a good like 30 minutes about this movie. We were almost done with the show, and it turned out that like we had some technical problems and things didn't get recorded. So we're now re-recording this, and so all my jokes, Lee's not going to laugh at them because he's already heard them. And that's gonna be great.
I'm so pissed off right now. I don't even recall any of your jokes. I don't think anything funny happened because
I don't think nothing funny happened because like things didn't get recorded. Anyway, this is a really fine film. I don't think this is going to end up on my best of the year list, largely because we're doing like some of the greatest films from the 20s and 30s, and anything that kind of exist in the public consciousness from 100 years ago is almost automatically going to be one of the greatest films ever made. And so I don't think this is going to end up on that list, but at the same time, it will end up like any other year. It would have very easily ended up on sort of a best of the year list for me.
Yeah.
Overall, like, I don't know, there's kind of a, complicated thing of which I both do and do not want to kind of talk about kind of the political angle of this. And since we've now gotten to takes of this, I kind of want to start off and kind of like actually split this into two conversations to kind of talk about this, like divorced from the political reality of the Vietnam War first, and kind of talk about like kind of like the reality of like kind of the actual just kind of situation that's in, which Walter Hill seems to have wanted audiences, or at least sold it to audiences or sold it to investors or whatever through interviews, by kind of saying like, no, this isn't about the Vietnam War, which this is very obviously about the Vietnam War. So I feel like maybe we should kind of do this twice, right? And kind of talk about it first as sort of like a kind of character drama, kind of a situation, because like ultimately this is about like a bunch of people with sort of like individual kind of character dynamics who kind of end up in this kind of like fucked up situation where they're put under stress. And it is kind of a kind of weird Romero movie in a way. Like I kind of like kind of doing this after Day of the Dead, just because it's this the situation in which Romero kind of like reached his peak kind of doing movies in which this sort of like band of people get put under stress, and like the horror movie elements are almost secondary to the sort of the horror of the kind of individuals who are going to kind of fight amongst each other.
Yeah.
And this does feel very much like a Romero movie, kind of like made for like a TV edit, where like we've taken out all the like blood and guts and gore, but we kind of keep like those dynamics. And it's kind of a really kind of fascinating thing to kind of think of it that way. I really do like the film. I really do kind of like some of the character elements and the dynamics here. I really kind of like, we've kind of got our two main leads who are sort of this, kind of down to earth kind of characters who are kind of going on and kind of doing this kind of like professional work, and they're just surrounded by a bunch of dipshits. And this would be fine, except like fucked up shit happens, which is largely not the fault of our leads. And then like they get kind of attacked by an indigenous population, which again, we're not going to talk about Vietnam for another like 10 or 15 minutes. So,
yeah.
But yeah, no, I think the film is quite good.
The thing Walter Hill has done before, like he kind of throws a little bit of this in a lot of movies he's done, but The Warriors comes to mind the most because it's the same sort of story. It's, small group of people. They're stuck in a foreign...
I have unfortunately not seen The Warriors, and that is because I am a couple of years younger than you, and that's the only reason, I think.
But yeah, I mean, The Warriors is very much similar to this. Right from the get-go, even the dynamic of having the leader killed, and it's basically the group under him have to survive in enemy territory and sort out their group dynamic now that their leader is dead. And, there's conflicting, they're butting heads while at the same time they're getting picked off one by one by their enemy who, are just hunting them down. And Peter Coyote in this, he's the professional soldier. He's the one who should see them through this. But then he's immediately killed, and it just leaves all these other conflicting different characters to their own devices,
Like, do you think that like Peter Coyote is like sort of a reasonable like sort of soldier? Like, do you think he's a kind of a good soldier? Do you think he could have gotten them through this at the beginning?
I think he could have. I pretty much think he's been in this shit, right? Like he was a Vietnam vet.
Yeah, right. I mean, I feel like this is so much sort of a training exercise. Like this is a thing that like, oh yeah, we do this a couple times a year. It's not a huge deal. It kind of sucks to kind of be out on your own for a while, but ultimately you're just kind of traipsing through the woods and like proving that you know how to use a compass and everything.
Yeah, it's orienteering with blanks in a rifle.
Right.
It's kind of what it is.
Blanks in the rifle kind of becomes a bit of a plot point at a certain point, because like it turns out, oh yeah, there's this one guy, the asshole, the big asshole there, Fred Ward, who, oh yeah, no, I actually packed some live rounds so that I could like kill things and eat them while we were on this thing. And you kind of get the sense of like, well, that's both very convenient for the plot and very.
It's a bullshit excuse because they're going to be out for a day at the most.
Yeah, exactly.
So what is he going to shoot and kill at that?
So it is like, yes, well, I can't possibly shoot blanks with my my gun. I can't.
Yeah, no. Fred Ward is looking for people to shoot. Is what he's doing. He's looking for an excuse.
Or he's looking. It's like, I don't know. There's this kind of like the kind of amosexual kind of
But I mean,
I don't have any problem with people that own guns and that sort of thing, so long as you're not like a right wing dipshit about it. It's a kind of complicated situation, but there is that class of man who is like, well, I can't possibly carry a rifle. Like, this is sort of the fantasy. This is sort of the thing that you kind of get into. Like, these guys are like National Guardsmen, right? Mm-hmm. And the whole idea of the sort of the National Guard, at least sort of like during the way it kind of gets advertised, is like, oh yeah, you do like kind of a weekend every few months, and then you do like 2 weeks a year of what amounts to like kind of training, just to kind of keep you in readiness, so that if we need you, you can kind of come in and kind of do like various things. And for the most part, it's like a hurricane happens, and so the National Guard comes and like stacks sandbags, right?
Hurricane Katrina,
Katrina. Well, I don't know. I used to live in the American South, so I kind of get the sense that like it's a thing that happens. Like they get sent out like whenever there's a FEMA disaster, or whenever there's a flood, whenever there's a kind of a big thing that needs wildfires. Some of the National Guard kind of show up there, and they end up being like it is kind of the one thing that like the American military is actually not so good at like actively winning wars, but they're really good at moving material around, and so it really does be like your whole strategy is kind of bringing in like people who are going to like do logistical work of like we have all the clipboards full of all the data of like exactly where this bottled water is going to go, and that's just sort of the thing that the American military is actually quite good at. It would be amazing if they were not using that to bomb brown people into submission,
right?
But we're not talking about politics right now.
No.
But yeah, no, it does. You just sort of get the sense of which like these guys are just kind of dipshits, and this film does take place in 1973, which is kind of the tail end of the Vietnam War.
Yep.
And I'm not as aware of sort of the dynamics of kind of what's going on with the National Guard versus the kind of full-range military around that time. But you sort of get the sense of like these guys that kind of couldn't hack it in the full military, who was kind of coming on and kind of LARPing to a certain degree.
But I mean, at this point, the military's still taking they're taking anybody. The morale is at an all-time low because they've just basically lost the Vietnam War. Even if they don't want to admit it, they've lost.
Well, everybody knew that they were losing. Very early on, like people are kind of aware of this kind of process of like we're losing, and then it's kind of like, well, why are we losing? And the real answer is like this is just unwinnable. There's no like victory condition that's even possible. When you're trying to do this.
So you gotta ask yourself, like, what is the National Guard going to attract? It's going to attract people who, there's going to be honest, earnest people who just want a job and to make some money. That's going to happen. But you're also going to get you guys hungry for comeuppance. Like the ones who I want to strike back and kill some brown people or whatever, kind of thing. And so there's talk of that, there's the opening conversation. It's just very brief. It's like 30 seconds where the second in command, Casper, talks to Peter Coyote's character and, mentions there's mercenary jobs opening up, soldiers like us, we could make some good bank going over to like Africa and shit like that. And, overthrowing countries. And Peter Coyote, who is the Vietnam vets, like they want soldiers. They don't want you. Like they don't want people like you, who are just like, some of you are tryhards and LARPers, like you said, and some of them are just working stiffs. They're desk clerks and stuff who want to make a little extra bucks on the weekend, so that kind of thing.
Right. I mean, there is this kind of thing, and I can recommend, can we say, I don't know if he's listening to this podcast, but he listens to my other podcast, which we will hype at the end. Journalist, conflict journalist and comedian, Robert Evans, a friend of the pod. I did an episode of Behind the Bastards, which was about the Soldier of Fortune magazine. I think it's a 2-part episode, and kind of described this sort of, the fact that this is like sort of this dipshit who was selling this kind of mercenary fantasy and this idea of like, oh, you too can go off and be a soldier and be a mercenary and be a badass, to couch potatoes and fatigue, essentially. Guys who had enough money to buy a big gun and didn't have the wherewithal to actually kind of learn how to use it properly and kind of use it for its appropriate purpose. Highly recommended. We'll kind of stick that in the show notes for sure. Yeah. It's hilarious and enlightening. But this is the type that like these are kind of the kind of people that are in there, and I feel like this also kind of feeds into this sort of idea of like, even in the Vietnam era, there was no like the modern day military is actually well, I shouldn't say that. The military, for over a while at least, was sort of like kind of reaching for the best and the brightest. They were looking for people who are, kind of above a certain mark, because like they didn't need as many like kind of rank and file soldiers. They needed people who met a certain standard. And then 9/11 happened, and then we decided, let's just start forever wars in 7 different countries.
Yeah.
And now they definitely kind of let people through who should definitely not be let through this process. But during Vietnam, there really was it actually is sort of documented that, like, because there was a draft and because nobody wanted to do this, and anybody who had any kind of ability to kind of get around it would not kind of go and go through the rice paddies of Vietnam. The soldiers there, with no disrespect for anyone who might be listening who served or had a relative who served, these are not kind of overall the kind of people that you really want to be soldiers if you're planning on kind of winning a war. And so there is this kind of like parallel, and maybe this lends us into more of the political angles of this. But there is this kind of parallel to like these are dipshit losers in this movie who have like violent fantasies about like kind of killing people, who have all these kind of like problematic attitudes, and just complete dipshits, and the kinds of shit that kind of happened in Vietnam.
And I mean, these guys, just like Vietnam, like the people who were drafted for Vietnam, bunch of kids who were not psychologically ready for combat, especially not guerrilla warfare combat, where you have an enemy that half the time you don't even see.
I have a cat in case anybody can hear.
Yeah. That's all right. I'm going to ignore that cat. It's not good. Phoebe. All right.
She killed something, probably a sock.
Great. But you get these young kids who are not, sure, they'll go through the training, but even like a professional soldier at that point who had probably been in the military for a while before Vietnam, not really ready for the type of war that they ended up fighting. Like they were fighting against a enemy that was far inferior in technology. And I mean, you get the same thing here in the movie. Like these Cajuns just have I think some of them had like flintlock muskets, for fuck's sakes. Like they were like the old guns. But at the same time, they just knew the environment. They knew how to track and hunt these guys. And even the fact that Fred Ward's character brings like a fucking box of ammo doesn't help them at all. Like, because they're just not ready to fight in this environment. They're not even ready to fight at all. So,
they're not in that headspace, right? It's not like, oh yeah, I'm going off to war. It's like, oh no, I'm going to go traipse through the woods for a while. And like, it is easy to kind of see like the horror movie element of this. And I think when you first kind of said like, oh, let's do this movie, and I kind of like read the description, I'm like, oh, this is going to kind of be a horror movie. But it both is and isn't. It kind of has that kind of Romero quality, in which like the real horror is sort of the actions that sort of happen within this kind of group dynamic. It is sort of the psychological threat more so than like this thing. But you can imagine this sort of like a version of this, which is like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but like where it's a bunch of like hillbillies, kind of murdering violently, a bunch of soldiers or whatever,
But I mean, yeah, this movie, even though it doesn't give you like a direct face for your antagonists so much, this film still takes the time to let you know that, yes, indeed, this is an actual culture that's been intruded upon and been wronged by these soldiers. And it also shows two sides of that culture. It shows just the regular Cajuns in the town who are just having like a celebration and a festival or whatever and just partying it up or whatever. It's really these hunters who are probably bad guys. Like they're shitty people. Like they're willing to kill because, these guys stole
like literally. So the incident, the incident that sort of makes the inciting incident, I should say, is they stole like 3 canoes. The soldiers did, the National Guardsmen did. And when they're kind of confronted from like 100 meters away on the bank, they're kind of like, oh, we left a note. We told you what we were going to do. Yeah. The Cajuns are never really sort of treated as individuals. You basically never, except in one character, which I think we'll get to in a second, you never really kind of get to a sort of who these people are and kind of what their motivations are, except for you stole our canoes. And then like this one, like the dipshittiest of the dipshit is like, I'm going to play a joke and I'm going to like lay down some machine gun fire, which these are blanks. So clearly, these people know I'm just firing on them with blanks. And they're going to take this as the joke that it is. And no, the answer is they're going to shoot your leader in the head. Completely justifiably, honestly, but then they start like hunting these people down and everything. And so there is this kind of like complicated dynamic in that, although it is kind of like, it's kind of hard to kind of know. And again, I feel that we should maybe talk about some of these characters and kind of talk about some of the actors, and then kind of get into some of the more Vietnam-y stuff, maybe.
So the Walter Hill thing here, again, going with the Warriors, a lot of the characters are kind of like one or two note, like they're background characters. Like it's basically Hardin and Spencer are your two main guys, and they're the fast friends. They're the more level-headed of the group. They're just the working stiffs.
I love that Spencer is like, well, I lined up some prostitutes, and you're welcome to one if you would like one. And it's like, I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, no, Hardin's like, I'm married, so and the only other like really standout characters, like you do have Casper, who's the soldier wannabe who wants to be an officer and shit, and he's trying to take control after Peter Coyote's character is killed, and it's not working out too well for him. But then you have Fred Ward's character, who is the fucking psycho who's looking for somebody to kill. And then you have that other guy,
he's Michael Madsen from Reservoir Dogs, effectively.
Yeah, he kind of is, although much more overtly vicious right off the bat. Like,
I mean, he brings live ammo, and he's like, "Oh no, in case we had to kill something while we were in the jungle or while we were in the swamp to eat." And it's like, dude, we were out here for a day, and we've got like 3 MRE. Like that was going to be fine. That was always going to be fine. Like, you brought these for a reason, and that's because you didn't want to. You didn't feel like you were a real man unless you were not shooting blanks, ultimately.
Yeah. But I mean, it's good. Like the Hardin and Spencer thing makes sense. Like they get along. Hardin is much more no bullshit though. Like he's not a guy who rolls with the punches. He's a guy who throws punches, whereas Spencer is a guy who is like, yeah, I know this is bullshit too, but I'm just going to run with it because, hey, at the end of the day, we're going to get some Cajun hookers. So that's what's coming up. He's just, that's all he's focused on.
I like to imagine that the prostitutes they were going to go for or were the people that they ran into in the town at the end of the film. Like it turns out like, oh no, we were going to get the hookers from here.
Well, I mean, Spencer gets to dance with that really attractive woman. Like, like model quality woman, like, wow, you're like the diamond in the rough in this little Cajun village,
yeah. Well, and that's the thing, like we sort of, it's interesting that the film, and again, kind of just kind of talk about kind of the nature of the film, is that we spend about 30 minutes kind of getting us into this kind of situation in which, like, okay, we're screwed, we've stolen these boats. Our leader is killed, and now we have to kind of like traipse through the jungle without a compass. Like it's a little like, well, we lost the compass, we lost the radio, we lost the map when we got like dunked in the water, and it's like, you guys are really bad at this. Like, you guys are really like, you brought one compass with 9 people.
Yeah,
there's one compass. There's one map. There's one radio. I mean, at least one radio is like, oh, that shit's expensive when you got to like harden it and kind of do it for military stuff. But it is like nobody else brought a compass. You guys are really bad at this. And so they basically end up spending like, I kind of like to imagine they basically spend like 2 days just kind of wandering in circles through the forest, and at the end it's like, okay, we got to find a place to sleep. And then they like sleep, and then they wake up in the morning, and then they found like they're like meters away from like the highway that they've been looking for the whole time, and that's how they get like saved or whatever. It's kind of a fascinating phenomenon. But like during this process, a whole bunch of the guys get killed, and they kind of get these kind of ominous signs of like rabbit pelts, and then they find like 8, I think it's 8 like bear traps. So what about, like, there are 9 of us? Like, why are there only 8? Or, kind of whatever. And then it turns out, oh no, there's also another, like, man trap, which is, spikes, which just goes straight through. Right after you say, like, oh yes, our one, or I think 2 African-American characters, which I think you informed me there are actually 2. Yeah. But our one guy who's sort of, like, coded as the African-American character, Oh yeah, take point. Okay, I'm going to take point. And then like 30 seconds later, not even 30, like 15 seconds later, spikes to the face. Yeah, congratulations.
Very Vietnamish looking kind of trap that he just walks into, and
it's not even Vietnamish. It's like Return of the Jedi.
He walks. Yeah.
I mean, Return of the Jedi is after this film, so it's hard to. But like, it's very
George Lucas, you hack.
You were clearly stealing devices from the Walter Hill movie from 1981. That's clearly
Right after that, they all freak out and run, and that's where they get in the conflict, where they start unloading like the one box of bullets they have all between them. They clearly go through like 4 boxes of bullets to try to kill all these guys, and that's where the Cajuns have somehow set up tree traps as well, where they're pushing, like, these trees are just falling on them, like in front of them and shit. Like,
there's a lot of shit of like, how did you know they were gonna go to this does have some sort of logical inconsistencies, shall we say, in terms of the powers of the Cajuns. But I think what's interesting is that the Cajuns, except for one character, are almost except for until you get to the end, but are almost entirely faceless. And here I think we can both kind of talk about this character and kind of lean into a little bit of the politics of the film.
So Brian James.
Brian James, who I think most people will know from Blade Runner.
Yeah.
But I kind of remember from The Fifth Element.
Yeah.
That's kind of like where my brain goes. It's like, oh yeah, he gets frozen to death in the Fifth Element because Lilu doesn't can't show her tits or whatever. But he's phenomenal here. He's a really good character. He's a really good actor. And they kind of run into this guy, and he's sort of like the one-armed man across in his shack. And then they just sort of like say like, oh, you're the one that like killed our guy. You're the one that kind of opened fire. And there's no justification for this.
No,
like they have nothing. They find dynamite in his shack, and I'm kind of like, oh, this is gonna come back later. They're gonna set some bombs or some shit for, and like, no, because our like dipshit violent asshole Fred Ward decides like, oh no, I'm gonna paint a fucking cross on my chest with.
It's not Fred Ward. It's the other guy. It's the guy who's
it's the other guy.
He's coded as like the Christian crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, in 1981, that had kind of very specific kind of political dimensions. But this idea of we're gonna find like the first random villager we find and decide that guy's guilty. Like that is so like what happened in Vietnam. Is just like it's what happens with like sort of like police forces in African American communities today, especially in kind of bigger cities. It's like, oh yeah, like we interviewed this guy, he said you did it, and then just kind of force him to admit it, and then like put him into the legal system. And it happens in the villages of Afghanistan. I don't know if you've seen the documentary Restrepo.
Yeah.
Very much a film that's kind of about like, again, military dipshittery, where, they're kind of transiting people kind of in and out of there on like 18-month regiments. And so like, just as people sort of start to get the hang of sort of the local communities, sort of like get working relationships with the kind of local tribesmen and that sort of thing, suddenly they rotate back into the U.S. and then which is again something that's like it's just kind of like dipshits all the way down in terms of like the American military occupation.
You make some connections and stuff, and all of a sudden you're gone, and then some kid who like a couple months before he got into boot camp was just playing Call of Duty on his fucking PS4 or whatever. Now all of a sudden he's in this village in the shit, like
right. And then by the time that kid like kind of learns the lay of the land, he gets replaced by the next guy. Not that we're saying that like anybody should spend any time at all like fighting this like useless war, which isn't a war, but like if you're like it is kind of the worst of all worlds, because it's not even like, oh yeah, we're going to build people until they have on the ground expertise and then like use them to actually do something effective. And the fact that that's the way these wars are waged should tell you what the real motive of anyway, but like this is the sort of thing to where like the U.S. military has like kind of always said like, the whole thing is the villagers kind of blend in, or sort of the bad guys blend in with the villagers. And so we have to raise the villager to get the bad guys, but then also we want the kind of hearts and minds of the people there then they have kind of no ability to kind of build these kind of working relationships, and like it's sort of this divergent goals, kind of divergent ideologies that kind of lead to this kind of incompetent or incomprehensible policy, right?
Yeah.
And this kind of gets kind of set up in microcosm with like they kind of approach this guy, they decide he's guilty, they take him prisoner, they blow up his fucking house, which of course in Vietnam and in Afghanistan, like burning down like people's houses is, you know, a complete, you know, this is text. This isn't even subtext. This is super text, you know.
Like, that's literally all that guy had in his life. Like, he's a one-armed trapper out in the bayou in Louisiana, you know, like,
right. Yeah, when he had dynamite, so he could, like, you know, bomb fish and like bring them to the surface, and he had like a rifle, and they blew everything away. And even then, and then later on, they torture this guy. They literally, they put his face in like this like awful water, and you know, he literally spares like the two people who like spared him. Yeah. Like, you know, and then it turns out like, oh no, I speak English. It's fine.
He's like speaking French this whole time, pretending, you know, it's almost directly like, if you wanted to go real super racist in this film, it's almost like he's directly going, no speaking English, you know, like it's very much that thing, or, you know, $5 soldier boy, you know, that kind of thing. And
right, well, you know, because that's like the strategy, right? Ultimately, like, I don't speak your language, I only speak French, you know, like, you know, whatever. And then like, no, it turns out I actually did speak your language, and I was watching everything that was happening, and like ultimately you were under my control the entire time, even when you had me like tied up to a tree or whatever.
And his performance is great because the movie shows you that, yeah, he's fucking with them. Like, it gives you like shots of his face and stuff where he's just watching them converse, and he's every once in a while he gets a little wry smile on the edge of his face and stuff like you know he's fucking with them, and it's pretty beautiful.
Yeah, he's much smarter than they give him credit for, and they kind of just treat him as an object for much of the film, you know. And then at the end, when he's like standing on that bridge, you know, with a rifle, and he's like, you know, now you're under my charge. Like, I'm gonna give you safe passage. Here's how you get out of here. Go. You know, it is kind of amazing reversal, and it does kind of show like a certain, you know, kind of character bit there, where he's a better person than the people who tortured him. Ultimately.
Yeah, it makes
he could have shot them in the head and then like buried them in the swamp, and nobody fucking would have known anything.
It makes it pretty clear that he is not associated with those trappers that are hunting them. Honestly, it feels like he might even be like an outsider to the community. Like, he just lives on his own as a trapper, and every once in a while,
like a hermit guy, kind of sitting out there and like doing his trapping and selling his pelts and kind of making his, you know, few bucks that he needs to kind of keep his thing going on. I mean, there is this kind of like phenomenon of like swamp people and hill people just kind of exist in these kind of like liminal spaces kind of outside of civilization. And civilization has this kind of complicated resonance and kind of complicated meaning within this kind of discourse. But, you know, kind of outside of like kind of what we think of as kind of like regulated society. And this is something we've talked a little bit about, I think, in in some other episodes, and I can't quite remember exactly what we talked about it at this point, because I thought I was going to be done recording.
Oh, maybe just before dawn. I think we did.
Right. Yeah. No, we talked a little bit about that, about how like these kind of people like who grants you the title to your property. So there's a bank in town, or I have a rifle and nobody is ever going to come and take it from me, and that's kind of the other way you kind of get this. And I feel like there is this kind of like a sense in the film in which like we've entered this space, we've entered this kind of place in which like we as sort of like representatives of this kind of U.S. military authority don't really have that authority, because like ultimately the U.S. government is not going to have any way to kind of get in here and like exert its will, even when like the amount of time passes to which the army is going to come looking for you, or the National Guard is going to come and kind of looking for us. They just kind of like buzz over the trees. They completely miss anything. Like, it is like the most incompetent search ever, right? You know?
And also, you know, the U.S. military doing training exercises through here with the National Guard. Yeah, they don't actually have authority in this area when it comes down to it. And But I mean, you get the sense that if they had just minded their own business and not fucked with these people, they would have been perfectly fine. That they probably would have passed these hunters in the woods, and the hunters just would have been like, yeah, whatever.
I mean, I do wish we had gotten like some context of who the hunters were.
Yeah.
I mean, the one kind of look we really get of the Cajun people is kind of towards the end. And this is where the film kind of, like, where I was kind of looking for, like, oh, we're going to kind of end on this kind of giant, like, kind of violent shootout at the end of the film.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately what we get is, kind of our hunter character who gives them kind of safe passage and kind of says, here's how you get out of here. Presumably he's in enough kind of contact with the rest of them to kind of say, like, they helped me out. We're going to let them live, although, well, I don't know. There's a kind of this is where it becomes complicated because we don't really get a sense of the kind of the internal dynamics of the Cajuns and like why these three guys are kind of still after them,
Well, here's the thing, like, as far as what I was tracking, watching this, so Brian James' character basically says, you stay over to like this side of the bank or whatever, and you keep going and you'll be fine. And so they do that, and they immediately run into like a highway. They run into a fucking truck, and they get taken to the nearest town. So I don't think Brian James said anything to any townies or anything, because the townies don't. They just seemed like, oh, these two guys got lost in the swamp, and so we're gonna give them some hospitality, let them clean themselves up, and hey, we're having a festival, so come dance and drink.
It is completely bizarre to see like these two guys in like full military fatigues, just kind of walking around in this like what looks like a pretty fun party. Like honestly, I suspect you and I have both been to this party on at least a couple of occasions.
It's very close to what would be like a Nova Scotian kitchen party kind of idea, except for just like in everybody's kitchen in town all at once,
Right. You go out there. It's just you kind of sit there. You got a host, and it's just like everybody kind of comes from.
They're all drinking Dixie beer.
Everybody's drinking. They're drinking Dixie lager, which is a thoroughly mediocre lager, but I can only imagine how good it would taste if you were like. It's just a fun time. You got a bunch of young ladies kind of dancing around, and then our curating there, he gets he looks like he's about to get some until the hunters kind of show back up and decide to throw their weight around and start shooting people.
Well, Hardin's like he's not having any of it, and that kind of speaks to that paranoia of a U.S. soldier in a Vietnam village. Who can you trust? Like, you're told the enemy are amongst you in this village, so he's thinking in those terms. He's like, no, we can't stop. We can't afford to stop here, drink and live it up because
let's just kind of keep going.
Yeah,
and but then the other option is like, look, the helicopter's going to find us. Like, we're going to take the next trip out, but also these people are not. They're clearly not trying to kill us. Let's have some beer and get our dicks wet. Is what's
exactly
saying, yeah.
Also, should mention in this sequence, people who are a little squeamish about seeing animals killed on screen. There's full pig slaughter in this.
It gets full surreal for a little bit because, I'm not quite. I don't know. I'd like to get your thoughts on this because I assume you've seen this. I watched this one time, like this afternoon, just before recording this. What do you think because you get like these kind of intercut sequences of like animal slaughter with sort of the people dancing and the sort of violence of the kind of final battle, and there's sort of a completely obvious reading in which like, oh, this is about kind of this brutality of war, brutality of like conflict sort of thing. But I'm wondering if you have a more sophisticated take on that.
Well, I think also it's just a culture thing too. Like it's just like, people who would be walking in Vietnam and walking these Vietnam villages. And these are these young American kids who have no contact with any foreign culture at all. Like they're just suburban white kids or whatever, or down on their luck. Lower class kids or whatever, not even in the suburbs. And then suddenly they're in these villages in Vietnam with these cultural practices that they're not familiar with at all. And they're seeing like all around them as they're walking into these villages. I think that's kind of what this is hinting at. And also, it's also just a very visceral thing that makes Hardin go like, we need to get fuck out of here or we're going to be like these pigs. We're going to get killed.
Yeah.
Like and I think it just helps to ramp up the tension and does a very effective job of it. And yeah, these are pigs being killed on screen because I watched the credits and there was nothing about animals not being harmed in this film. So.
Right. Yeah, no. I mean, it's very clear that, but also, like, I mean, look, not to speak for you, but like I live a life in which, I don't have to kill the meat that I eat every day. Mm-hmm. I buy a pork shoulder and it's like wrapped up in a nice plastic package for me, and like I have no discomfort kind of handling that and kind of understanding what it is. But it is like kind of funny how like people who eat meat every day, people who are completely sort of comfortable with that, get like really grossed out by like the blood at the bottom of the package, or get like really kind of disgusted handling it. And there's a very clear kind of disconnect between like this piece of meat that you just bought is like the muscle of an animal that was murdered for you to eat. And I think there are like completely like complicated conversations about like factory farming and how terrible that is. Like it's a complete atrocity. But like there's a different thing of like I killed this pig myself so that I can feed myself and the people in my community. Mm-hmm. Like that's a very kind of different thing than like the way the meat that I eat is much less ethically sourced than like within the context of this film, the deaths of those pigs. So.
Yeah, Hardin and Spencer, they get picked up by this young couple in their truck and driven to the town, and they happen to be the ones with the pigs on the back of their truck. These pigs are set up to go to this town for the festival. Mm. They're going to be the feast for everybody. And so, I mean, even then, like, you got to kind of think, like, I'm not super freaked out about seeing slaughtered animals and stuff because I've lived in a family that has hunted and stuff like that for as long as I've been alive and been aware. So it's not something that bothers me on a sort of visceral level. Like I definitely do have complicated feelings about like factory farming and stuff like that, but hunting as far as, keeping a stable population of animals and things like that, because I mean, if you actually don't cull deer, they do just suffer and die during the winter because their population explodes. And I mean, that's a real thing. But I mean, these are pigs. This is a bit of a different connotation here, but you directly see pigs get shot on screen. Like there's no like cutaway. They take the rifle and put it right to its head, shoot it. Then you see a pig get cut open and bled from the throat. You see its innards get pulled out. It's very much designed to freak these two guys out and to make you feel freaked out with them. Like, we need to get the fuck out of this town.
I miss that detail of like, they're riding in the back with the pigs.
Yeah.
Ultimately. And so like, if that's the case, then ultimately that's a sort of a signifier of like, well, you're next, basically.
Exactly. That's got to be on their minds. But at the same time, I don't begrudge the Cajuns at all. That's their culture. That's the food they eat. They actually have to do that, right?
That's much more. I mean, again, that's much more ethically sourced than the food that I ate for dinner.
Exactly, and that just goes to what I was saying about Americans who would be going into like these Vietnamese villages and seeing stuff that they had never seen before happen. Like you would probably see Vietnamese villagers like slaughtering fowl and stuff like that, like just every day-to-day stuff, right? And I mean, if you're taught to hate your enemy, they're lower savages or whatever the fuck, that's going to probably reinforce those feelings, unfortunately. And I don't know if it's necessarily that hard in the context of this film. I don't necessarily think the film's trying to like make even our heroes think lesser of the Cajuns or anything like that, but I think that's kind of a thing happened.
I don't think that's kind of what that's going for at all. Talking to you, I feel like it is like, we're seeing the murders of these pigs, and it is supposed to be sort of a violent contrast to the violence of the action sequences that kind of come in the end. And I think it's a little bit, even when I was kind of like questioning what it meant, I think it's a bit of a masterstroke for the film, because we've spent so much time in this sort of like very almost mundane kind of walking through the swamp kind of thing. And then like at the end you get this like both frenzied crescendo of violence, and you get this sort of like kind of thematic thing, kind of, you know, almost hammering it into your head. But the fact that it's like you know, kind of slightly abstracted does sort of like aid kind of make it slightly less avaricious than it might otherwise be.
Yeah. But yeah, do we have any other final thoughts before we go to trivia and stuff? Or
Some great performances, great actors.
It is. It's.
You know, I'm not sure a woman has a speaking role in this.
The Cajun woman says a couple things in French, and it says briefly in English, "Follow me, I'll show you where you can wash up." That's about it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's about it. But like, you know, which is not necessarily a terrible. You know, I'm not going to say the film is terrible because of that, but it is sort of one of those like. I mean, this is a very like dudes walking around.
I mean, you can't. You can't really like put.
I mean, but that's what the movie is. I'm not criticizing for that.
Yeah, no. I mean, in the context of the era, you can't have a woman in the squad. Basically, that's one thing. And also, if you did have a woman in the squad, you know what it would be. They would have captured a Cajun woman and would be holding her prisoner. Which
it would be 10 minutes of rape.
It's the thing. Like if this was a lesser movie,
no.
like if this
now I remember what we're doing next week, and I'm like, oh.
Like if this was like a really vicious exploitation film, you know that would be like something that someone would consider.
It would be the last 20 minutes of Soldier Blue, but for like an hour.
Oh my god, no. Yeah, Soldier Blue. I mean, that's exactly what it would be, right?
Which I just discovered just showed up on Rare List. So go download.
Go get it.
Soldier
yeah,
Blue
if you want to be,
worth a watch. Yeah.
If you want to be super depressed, go watch Soldier Blue.
If you want to be thoroughly entertained by a goofy romantic comedy for an hour, and then like want to slit your wrists at the end.
Yes, if you want to have your dick stroked and then like stepped on with a cinder block, then let's go right there.
That sounds way more fun than Soldier Blue.
Budget for this.
Wrap this thing up.
Yeah, budget for this was $7.6 million. United States gross eventually was $5 million, so it did not make its money back. If you want to get this on Blu-ray, Shout Factory is your best steal there. They had a recent Blu-ray release in the last few years, and it looks pretty good. Only a little bit of trivia here. Should mention here the use of the phrase Southern Comfort as the title of the film, which was meant ironically, of course, had to be cleared by the Brown-Forman Corporation, owned the rights to the phrase as they make the liquor of the same name, the liqueur. Yeah.
I like to imagine like what the marketing department wanted to insist on is like halfway through the film. It's like, it turns out I had a bottle of Southern Comfort all the time and 9 glasses. And so then you have like a little commercial where they just kind of sit around and go like, I know we're running from the Cajuns. I know that we're in the middle of a vast Vietnam metaphor. Mm-hmm. Let's all just sit and sip on our Southern Comfort around this fire for 5 minutes and talk about how great the product is before we move on into the rest.
They go into this authentic Cajun town.
It's like the Beans farting scene from
Blazing Saddles.
But it's like a SoCo ad. That's kind of what I imagine.
No, they go to the town, the Cajun town, and the party. It happens to be sponsored by Southern Comfort this year. Oh man, big banner comes down. It's hanging, between the trees. Yeah. Southern Comfort.
They walk into like this Cajun village, and it's like it's like the Walker family thing, sponsored by Southern Comfort with like a big logo.
It's like one of the pigs they slaughter has Southern Comfort like branded on it.
Oh no, we're gonna marinate this meat in Southern Comfort. That's we should move on from this now.
Yeah.
Everybody understands the joke.
Yeah. Southern Comfort. In one part of the movie, the Cajuns set a trap that includes falling cypress trees. Even though the filming was being done deep in the cypress swamps of Caddo Lake, there were no trees available for this, because cypress is a protected species of tree. So these trees were plastic trees, and basically trucked into the swamp and then dropped at our actors. Basically, is what they did.
But you also just kind of imagine like how much work did these fucking Cajuns put in when like for like 1% of that effort they could have just come upon them in the dark and shot them all in the head.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can tell they're kind of more bad guys because they're fucking with these soldiers. Like at one point they dig up the bodies of their dead comrades and string them to a tree. I mean that's So
as you do also
exactly. Yeah.
You stole my canoe. I'm so angry. I'm going to handle the dead body of your comrade and string it before you. Like that's how angry I am that you borrowed my canoe. That's
well, you also shot blanks at me. I mean, that's the inexcusable. Yeah. So what are we doing next time, Daniel?
Well, I think we agreed in the DMs that we were going to do a couple of more Vietnam movies, just because this kind of got me kind of itching to do a little bit of Vietnam stuff, and I think we'll do an Oliver Stone. We'll do Platoon.
Okay.
From I think 86, and a movie I haven't seen since it was like originally on HBO in the early 90s. A Brian De Palma film, Casualties of War. I think it'll be fun to kind of do those two together. And I know that there's some fucking rape in Casualties of War, which I just heard as I was sitting here. But so we're gonna do that. We're gonna get like super serious and talk about fucking Vietnam for an episode, and then maybe we'll do some comedies after that, just to cleanse everybody's palate.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what we'll do next week.
All right, cool. So tell people where they can find you on the interwebs, Daniel.
I am on Twitter at Daniel E. Harper. That's the best place to find me. You can DM me. I'm really terrible about getting back to it. I get a lot of shitty DMs. I mostly tweet about Nazi shit and politics. Not that I'm a Nazi, to be clear. As I can't imagine anybody doesn't understand this already from listening to me. I do another podcast called I Don't Speak German. I don't speak German.libsyn.com. I have spent the last 4 years of my life obsessively researching the propaganda of the worst people in the English-speaking world, and I explain it all to you through that podcast. So if you are interested in that, it's worth a listen, possibly.
Yep.
It has jokes. Sometimes funnier ones than this one, especially when Chris Cantwell is involved. But yeah.
Yes, and you can find us at tmbdos.podbean.com, where you can find our Apple Podcast, Facebook, and YouTube links. Join the Facebook group, best way to find out what's coming up, and interact with us, give us movie suggestions, and just comments about how witty and attractive we are, and the usual kind of stuff that we're used to getting all the time.
We had a comment on the Facebook group you didn't read. Darren Wilson said, I don't have it in front of me, but it was like, yeah, you can come on my show, talk about Land of the Dead.
I figured you read it, so I didn't want to. I figured that was less a show comment and more like, hey, Daniel.
Yeah, no, I was just going to respond to him here because I don't really respond to anything on Facebook. And it's like, no. Yes, I will come on your show, and I will make Lee do this with me one day. That's going to be the plan.
Oh, okay.
Not really. It's fine. Darren, assuming you're listening, yes, I would love to come on your show and talk about Land of the Dead if you're interested. Yes.
Yeah, you guys go do it. I like the movie, but I don't need to talk about it. And it's like,
Fair enough. You and I are going to be doing this into our 70s. You understand that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I got nothing else going on. So, I mean, what the fuck?
Assuming I live that long, the coronavirus doesn't kill me.
Well, I mean, yeah. By the time we hit our 70s, there'll probably be like some mutation of coronavirus at that point that will finally finish us off.
Yeah.
Whatever.
You and I will live together. We'll be the old podcasting couple. We will sit on the porch and drink what is
Southern Comfort.
By that time, drink Southern Comfort. I was going to say we would drink, but what that is time, the incredibly old-fashioned attitude of like bourbon barreled stouts. Like the kids will no longer accept that as like a valid thing that people drink. but you and I will be there, and we will live in some like house. I just imagine us on like separate rocking chairs and talking about movies, you know, and just recording from microphones in front of us and then putting it out there for like a TMBDOS episode like 25,342. You know,
can you believe these old fucks and their MP3s? They're not even using holograms. What the fuck? I'm not listening to that podcast.
And we will still get comments of like, why did you not include the movie?
Because it's like 2052. Movies don't exist anymore, you stupid kids. Yeah. I think we're done. Thank you.
I think we've been done for a while, but
yeah.
This is what happens when we have to record the episode twice.
We salvaged.
Enjoy this one. Enjoy. I hope you enjoyed this again. This one, fuckers. You know.
I think we did a good job of salvaging it. So I think the conversation went good. So thank you guys. Thank you, Daniel, and we'll be back when we're back. Goodbye. Thank you for listening to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. For further episodes, our Apple Podcasts, Facebook, and YouTube links, please go to tmbdos.podbean.com. Thank you. Drive through.